country.
The continued operational excellence of our military also requires that it reflect Canada in all its diversity, that it be inclusive, and that it provide at all times and all ranks a respectful environment for women.
Last week, Canada's Defence Minister announced the government's vision for the military for the next 20 years, and Harjit Sajjan, who you heard there, stressed that women are a key part of that vision. Recruiting women is a priority for the Canadian Forces. The government says its goal is to have a workforce which is 25% female in the forces by 2026. But Canada's military can be a difficult place for women. The forces have struggled with sexual and emotional harassment of women in the ranks. And now one mother says the Navy told her she had to choose between caring for her child or serving at sea. Laura Nash is a sub-lieutenant in the Canadian Navy. She's a single mother with a 6-year-old child. And balancing work and parenting can be a fine balance at the best of times. But the Navy made a 6-week training deployment mandatory, and Laura Nash had a problem. No one to care for her child and no choice from the Navy. She's now taking her case to the Canadian Human Rights Commission. Murray Brewster is the CBC's parliamentary defence reporter based in Ottawa. He spoke with Laura Nash, and he brings us her story. Hi, Murray.
Hello, Anna Maria.
Tell us more about Laura Nash.
Well, she's a 33-year-old woman who grew up in southern Ontario. She was a champion kayaker who represented Canada in many major world competitions, and she joined the Navy in 2010 and was training to be a maritime surface and subsurface officer. That's essentially a ship's navigator and warfare officer. She was based in Esquimalt, BC. But things became difficult for her in 2012 after her relationship with her child's father broke up.
And why did it become difficult?
Well, her job requires extended deployments at sea, and officers also have to stand duty watches even when their warships are in port. Now, she was a single mom and was flying her son back and forth between Esquimalt and Toronto because her parents are in the Belleville area and they were able to care for him. And it was an expensive process, and she told me that it was difficult for her and her son. And it all came to a head when she was taking a course in 2013 that would have led to her advancement.
What happened there?
Well, she was at the point where she was looking for a transfer to another branch of the military because of her circumstance. But she was required to finish the course, and when she was called in by the head of the department, this is what happened.
She told me effective immediately, we're ceasing your training, you have too many family matters to deal with. And she removed me from the course. She denied me my promotion.
And it got worse. Later on, Laura Nash says that same officer presented her with an ultimatum.
Her and another female officer brought me into their office alone, and they told me that if I didn't get rid of my child by January of 2014, that I would be fired. And so I tried to make the decision of whether I was going to give away my child on a permanent basis so that I could keep working, or if I was going to get fired because I was going to keep my child. I couldn't go to sea. I didn't have a husband that was living with me or that was helping with childcare, and I didn't make enough money to have a full-time nanny or anything like that. I was just completely unsupported, and the decision broke me. I couldn't make the decision. It was a catch-22. I didn't want to live without my child, but I needed a means of supporting him, and so I didn't want to lose my job.
Get rid of my child. These are senior officers telling her this, and they're women?
Yes. I know it's shocking. But in some respects, it's not surprising because some of the experience I've had dealing with the military over 20 years is that women in the military hold other women to higher standards, sometimes an impossibly higher standard.
So what did Laura Nash do after she was given that ultimatum?
Well, she was in limbo for months, and she was asked if she could get a transfer again to another trade. Now, there are dozens of other jobs in the military that could have worked out for her, but she was a single mom, and Laura says the things didn't work out very well.
I had a base personnel selection officer who's supposed to be in charge of moving people into new trades. Can't do another trade for whatever reason. And when I told her that I'm a single parent and I cannot do this trade, I can't sail on this schedule, she rolled her eyes and she said, everyone has things to deal with when they deploy. I had to find a place to store my car, and I had to change my cell phone plan. And so that's the way that some of the women in the military look at children. They're just another piece of administration to deal with. They're not humans. They're not something that needs to be taken care of and raised and loved. and something to be with their mom. I know at least 3 different women who have given their children away so that they could keep working in the military, and I guess some women can do it, but I just couldn't.
She talks about giving their children away. Where did they expect her son to go?
I have no idea. That is so unclear. And Laura says that her mother was sick and her dad was working full-time, and it would just be too difficult to send him to her parents. And the father's child wasn't in the picture, so she really had nowhere to send her son.
So it sounds as if she's put in an impossible situation.
Well, it was, and it really took a toll on her.
It's been an awful 7 years. It's been awful.
So, take us into that room. You essentially had 2 female superior officers telling you to give up your child, or choose between your career and your child. What was going through your mind?
At the time, I had tried to place my duty to the country above my son. And I couldn't do it. Sorry, I knew I'd cry.
It's okay. Just take a moment.
Now, Laura told me that she pleaded with him not to send her to sea. And, you have to understand that had she refused an order to go to sea, she would have been put in jail, and that would have shown up on her service record. She ended up, though, on a medical category.
You can hear how hard it was on her. In that little exchange with you right there. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I mean, she being placed in a temporary medical category was pretty much the only alternative. And it caused her a lot of anxiety, and she told me she started to fear for the future. Eventually, Laura fell into a depression, and even at one point, she admits she contemplated suicide.
And did going on medical leave help her situation? Did it improve anything?
Well, unfortunately not. There are unspoken consequences in the Canadian military for admitting that you have mental health issues. And that's despite the fact that over the years, the leadership of the Canadian Forces has encouraged people to come forward. Laura Nash essentially believes that she was blacklisted. She became, in her words, discounted goods, labeled as someone with a medical disability, and she wasn't perceived as being helpful or useful. And Laura claims that when she asked for mental health help, there was none. In 2014, when she was suicidal, she said she went to the base for help, and she says she was just sent away, and, quote, "I don't think anyone there cared if I lived or died."
So it just kept spiraling, Marie. Now she's asking the Canadian Human Rights Commission to look into her case. Where does that stand?
Yes, well, I mean, Laura's lawyer brought the complaint forward, and it is a discrimination claim, arguing that she was discriminated against on the basis of sex and disability. And they're still waiting to hear from the commission for a formal response, but it is unlikely, according to a preliminary finding that came into their possession just a couple of days ago, it's unlikely that it's going to proceed. And we interviewed Laura's lawyer, Natalie McDonald, about this.
Laura Nash has suffered a traumatic experience as a result of this. She wanted to be in the military, she wanted to serve her country, and she did everything she could in order to do that. And the manner in which she's been treated is simply deplorable as a result. No one should ever ask a mother to give up their son in order to become advanced at any organization. That is just something that is despicable and should be punished.
Now, Laura told me that she brought forward the human rights case because she wanted to make sure that no other woman in the Canadian military is ever put into the same position as she was.
And there are so many levels of issues that she has with them here. At the same time, isn't it expected that certain jobs in the armed forces mean you must be deployed, and that all parents need to anticipate that?
Yes, indeed, but I'm going to give you her lawyer, Natalie McDonald, to answer that question because she really doesn't mince the words.
I say that's ridiculous. That's absolutely unfair. It's discriminatory, and I would hope by 2017 that kind of attitude would be banished from society. Quite frankly, a woman is able to choose whatever career she wants to, but when she has family status issues, which is exactly what Laura Nash was experiencing, on the basis of her sex, the employer and even the Canadian Armed Forces needs to accommodate that request for accommodation.
Now, there are two issues here. The first is that the military's duty to accommodate is just like any other employer. But the second issue is about respect, and it relates to the Canadian Armed Forces policy called Operation Honour. Now, that was put in place in August of 2014 with the goal of stamping out sexual misconduct in the military. And that has gotten most of the media attention, but largely this is about treating people within the military with dignity and respect.
So what does the Department of National Defence have to say about Laura's story and her specific situation?
A spokesperson would not comment directly on the case because of privacy issues. And last week, though, I interviewed General Jonathan Vance and asked him about issues related to making work life in the military more flexible.
General Jonathan Vance is, of course, the Chief of Defence Staff of the Canadian Forces.
Yeah, that's right. I talked to him because those are some of the broader issues that are at stake. The military is trying to recruit more women and change the image of the forces. Now, there's a very slick PR campaign underway. Military leaders are saying all of the right things, but Laura Nash's story illustrates that the reality for women can still be trying. And General Jonathan Vance, he wouldn't comment specifically on this case, but he was addressing the circumstances like this when he spoke about the government's new defense policy last week. Here's General Jonathan Vance and what he had to say about how the military is trying to turn things around.
I want people to join the Armed Forces. It's a great place to work. It's a great place to meet those high ideals of this country. I want to encourage the youth of Canada to look at the Armed Forces as a high-quality institution, an institution of excellence that will treat them well, treat their families well over time, and where you can serve your country in a way that nobody else can. I want 25% of women in the forces, not because it's the right thing to do, and it is, but it's also how we're going to be more combat effective into the future. And there's no question about it that the narrative around the military has been challenging over the past few years. And it's not that it's not deserved. I recognize that it's deserved. I need to change the reasons why that narrative exists. I'm working on that as hard as I can.
Well, clearly not enough has been done to keep someone like Laura Nash around.
Well, General Jonathan Vance told me that it is often in the military's interest to retain everyone they train because it's an investment. And I also asked the General about the Armed Forces' duty to accommodate people. He said there needs to be a balance. On the one hand, making room for people who can't deploy and those who have different opportunities. But on the other hand, there's making sure that they aren't recruiting an unrestricted number of people who can't be deployed.
So where does that leave Laura Nash?
Essentially, she's being released at the end of July, and she doesn't know where she's going to go or how she's going to support her son after that. I asked Laura if she was still interested in serving in the Canadian Forces.
That's a tough question because I love our country. I've represented it before as an athlete. I think that our military comes from such an honorable institution. We have such a great reputation from World War I and World War II. It has so much potential to give so many people wonderful careers and to do good around the planet, and I don't think that we're doing that. I would have liked to stay in, but because there's no guarantee that I won't be harassed again, that they don't take harassment very seriously, that people of higher rank can do whatever they want to me without consequence. I don't know the answer to that, but I don't know what else I'm going to do for the future. I don't know. Like, I dedicated my life to the forces and got nowhere.
Murray, we are coming off of a 10-year war in Afghanistan, and there's talk of peacekeeping. I mean, has the Canadian Forces actually looked at the issue of childcare for all of its members? Because there are parents where both people in the couple are in the military. There are other single parents. Have they looked at this at all?
I don't think that they've looked at it in any great detail because the military has had its hands full in dealing with members who have been either wounded overseas, physically or mentally, and getting the care for them right. I think that the issue of how to deal with families is something that is going to become much more prevalent over the next couple of years, because you're going to see issues that relate to Afghanistan in terms of perhaps broken families and perhaps in terms of children who need help. But we are going to be having more deployments overseas, as you noted, with peacekeeping, and there's the Latvia deployment that has just gotten underway. So it is an area that the military is going to have to study. Okay, well, Murray, thank you for bringing us this story. You're welcome. Murray Brewster, the CBC's parliamentary defense reporter. He joined us from Ottawa. What do you think? Are there things that the armed forces could be doing for parents in the military, for single parents, for others, when it comes to childcare and schooling, so that Canadian Forces troops can be available when they are needed at the drop of a hat? Let us know. You can tweet us. We are at The Current CBC. Find us on Facebook. Go to our website, cbc.ca/thecurrent, and click on the contact link.